Okay, today we're going to do multiplying radical expressions. So write this down. Okay, the key to remember here is that you need to do the outside times the outside and the inside times the inside. We've already done a little bit of this when we simplify and we bring out our pair and the prisoner comes out, we multiply by what's on the outside. I do this a little differently because if you can prime factor it quickly, that'll make it go faster. So if we have the square root of 5 times the square root of 15. There's nothing on the outside. Well, there's a 1 on the outside. We have our invisible ones. So we multiply 1 times 1, and that's what's on the outside. You don't have to write the 1, but of course you can. And then we do 5 times 15. Well, I'm not going to actually do 5 times 15 because I need to pull out any twins that we have. They have to escape from prison. So we have the 5 from here. And then 15 can be written as 5 times 3. So instead of going through the whole process of timesing 5 times 15 and then prime factoring the answer that you get from that, I just prime factor from the beginning. And then I go through and let's pull out our twins. So in this case, our twins here are the 2 5s can come out. Something horrible happens on the way out. There's a 1 outside waiting, getaway car. We times that by 5 and left behind is our 3. So my answer to this would be 5 root 3. If you don't simplify the radical, you will lose points. Let's do another example. Number 2. So if we do the square root of 6 times 2 root 3. Again, outside times outside, inside times inside. We have our invisible 1 here, our understood 1. So outside times outside is going to be 1 times 2. And then we're going to do our inside times inside. Again, I'm not going to do 6 times 3 and do 18 and then undo the 18. I'm going to take that 6 and I'm going to prime factor that to 2 times 3. And then I'm going to bring over that other 3 and I'm going to look for any pairs to pull out of the radical. So now I look at and I have a pair of 3s. Waiting outside, I have my getaway car, which is the 2 waiting. Something horrible happens, 2 times 3 on the outside, and left behind is a 2 on the inside. Again, if you give me the answer like this, I'm going to take a point away. And the reason is you need to do 2 times 3, and that's going to be 6 root 2. Okay, you can always pause and ask Miss Sally some questions if you have some questions. Let's go to another example. I'm going to switch screens. And we're going to do, this is our third example. Our third example is 3 root 7 times 2 root 14. Okay, keep in mind the rules. Again, the rules are outside times outside, inside times inside. Outside times outside is 3 times 2. Now you could write the 6 if you want. And then on the inside, again, I'm not going to actually multiply them. I'm just going to write them as factors. So a 7. And then the 14 can be written as 2 times 7. We look for our pairs. Again, remember, they don't have to be right next to each other as long as it's all multiplication. So this group of 7 can come out. Outside, we also had this 3. And we also had this 2 waiting on the outside. This 2 is left behind. It doesn't have a partner. So that 2 stays on the inside. Then we multiply these together, and that's going to give you 42 root 2. Okay? Let's do this with some letters. So if we have variables instead, we could do number 4 is going to be x times xy. Now this is different than adding. We don't have to have the same thing under the radical in order to multiply. Just like with variables, you can multiply any variables together, but you can't add them. Same thing with radicals. Outside times outside. Again, we have our understood 1 on the outside. So we have a 1 on the outside, and then we're going to square root on the inside. We have x times y. I'm not going to write x squared because that's a pair that can escape. Again, something horrible happens on the way out, only one of them gets out, and y is left behind. So then we have x square root of y. Let's do another one like that. If we have x root 3, the square root of x to the third times the square root of x squared y squared. Again, I'm not going to multiply them. I'm just going to write them out in one radical in prime factored form. So x to the third is x times x times x. X squared is x times x. And y squared is y times y. That just makes it easier for me to pull out the pairs, and I don't have to multiply and then undo it. So I take out my pairs. I have an x. I have another set. Remember, something horrible happens, only one of them makes it, and we know it's multiplication. This one does not have anybody to go with. These two can escape. Something horrible happens. And then left behind in our little radical prison is x. Again, this answer is not complete because you should have x squared y square root of x. That will be your final answer. I'm going to give you 3 problems to try in your notebook. Have somebody in the room check them or check with your neighbor to make sure you're doing them, and then we're going to move on to a different type of multiplication. So here's your practice. Try on your own. I'm going to write it down. You're going to write it in your notebook. You're going to try it. And then I'm going to put the answer at the end. So 2 root 3 times root 18. Try that one. Number 2 is 5 root 15 times 2 root 12. And number 3 is going to be x squared y to the third times square root of 4xy. Now I want you to pause it here, do some of these problems, have Miss Sally and whoever else is in the room check your work, and then when you're ready, hit play again and the answers will be here. So the answer to number 1 is 6 root 6. The answer to number 2 is 60 root 5. And the answer to number 3 is 2x y squared square root of x. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is distribute. So, same rules apply, just like we did before. Inside times inside, outside times outside. So the square root of 2 times the quantity, root 3 plus root 5. Just like we distribute, if there was x's or numbers, we're going to distribute. We're going to do this times this. So that's 2 times 3. Then we're going to do this times this. And that's 2 times 5. There's nothing on the outside because we did 1 times 1. There's no pairs to pull out. And so this is the square root of 6 plus the square root of 10. These two can't go together because what's underneath the radical are completely different. And so that's your final answer. Let's try another one. Square root of 5 times the quantity, square root of 15 plus, no, let's do minus, sorry. 2 square root of 10. I'm going to do the same thing that I did in the prior part where we factored it as we went to save ourselves the energy of multiplying and then unmultiplying. So outside times outside, so in this case a 1, inside times inside. So 5 is just 5, and then 15 would be 3 times 5. Then I need to continue distributing. I need to multiply this. Outside times outside, so that's going to be a 2 on the outside. And on the inside, we have our 5. And then our 10, we can do the same thing. We can factor it, 2 times 5. Now we're going to pull out our twins, and in this case, this is a 5. The 5s can come out. There's a 1 out there waiting. So 5 root 3 is this one. Now this one, again, we're pulling out the 5s, but there's a getaway car waiting. So we do 5 times 2, and that's how we get the 10 root 2. Again, there's nothing that can be put together because we have a root 3 and a root 2. So this is our final answer. Let's do another one. Number 3, as an example. 2 root 3 times 4 root 12 plus 5 root 6. We're going to distribute. This time we got to be really careful because we have outside. So we do 2 times 4 on the outside. On the inside of this, we have 3 times 12. And 12 is going to be 2 times 2 times 3. All I did was take 12 and split it up. Because 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. That's where I got these numbers. Okay? You can take it can take you longer if you need to, but that's the way I did it because I know 12. Okay? Now I have to go back. Don't forget to continue distributing. Outside times outside, so that's 2 times 5 this time. And on the inside, we have our 3, and then we have our 6 that can be split into 2 times 3. Now we're going to pull apart anything we're going to pull out anything that can be pulled out. So we have our 2 out here waiting, our 4 out here waiting. Now I'm going to pull out any twins that I have. Well, the 3s, even though they're not next to each other, remember they escape, but something terrible happens, so only one of them makes it out. And then we have a set of 2s. They escape. Okay? Now, remember what I said. If there's nothing left in the jail collapses, so there's no square root. So we don't need to do anything about that. So there's no square root here because there's nothing left under the radical. Okay? The next one, we do 2 times 5. They're waiting outside. We pull out any twins that we have. Here we go. Here's our twins. Something horrible happens. One of them makes it. One of them does it. The 2 did not have a twin, so that's what's left behind. So we have the square root of 2. And now we just multiply everything together. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 times 3 is 24. And 24 times 2 is 48. On the outside of this one, we have 2 times 5, which is 10. And 10 times 3, which is 30. The root 2 has nothing, so that just goes here. Again, these cannot be combined because the same thing is not under the square root. If they had the same thing under the square root, we could combine them. Tonight, when you do your homework, I'm giving you 1 through 14. You can do 1 through 14, odds or evens. I recommend that you do both, but all that you're required to do is odds or evens. And I will be doing a homework quiz when I get back on Monday.